Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for watching. Today we're going to do a video that I have been just chomping at the bit to get done, and I've actually heard from a few of you guys in the comments who have been looking forward to this one as well. So the time has finally come for the best 9mm duty ammo test. So the 3 rounds we're going to test today are all obviously kind of marketed towards duty use and police officers. And I have tested all 3 of these in previous videos and several different tests, but today we're gonna stack them up against each other and see how they compare. So the 3 rounds we're testing are the 135 grain plus P Hornady Critical Duty, the 135 grain Federal Premium Hydra-Shok DEEP, and the 147 grain Speer G2. And then the gun we're using for this is my Glock 17. Obviously, for a duty ammo test, you kind of want to use a full-size pistol. And the ballistics gel blocks that we're using for this are my Clear Ballistics 20% ballistics gel blocks. Obviously, this one's in much better shape than this one is, but when these gel blocks get to a certain point, they're kind of hard to melt down, and there's just so much debris in them that, I mean, you'll spend hours trying to pick all that stuff out of there. So whenever they get to this point, I kind of wait until I just absolutely have to melt them down, and then I do it. So you can see there are bullets and stuff in this one, but they're, you know, pretty far down. And this one should work just fine as a secondary block. So, by the way, for our slow-mo camera, we are using the GoPro that earned its stripes the other day by taking an AK-47 round straight to the lens. You can see that the lens cover is no longer on it. Obviously, it was just a ricochet. It didn't take an actual, you know, full-on hit, but it did take an AK-47 ricochet, and it survived. So that thing is a tank. Now, we're gonna do a couple different tests with these 3 bullets, which means I'm gonna have to try and put about 6 rounds into 1 ballistic gel block, which isn't gonna be easy, but I'm gonna try and place these shots strategically, and if I do my part, I should be able to manage. By the way, 2 out of the 3 rounds I'm testing today were actually sent to me by viewers, so shout out to you guys for helping out the channel. First, we're gonna do the heavy clothing test, which is a denim layer, a heavy fleece layer, a heavy t-shirt layer, and a thin t-shirt layer. Obviously, with duty ammo, hard barriers are important, but stuff like this is important as well because most situations, you know, you're not gonna be shooting through car doors and windshields and stuff like that. So we're gonna do the heavy clothing test first, and the round we're gonna start with is the 135 grain plus P Hornady Critical Duty. I actually think this is the round that the FBI uses, so thought it'd be a good one to start with. So typically with these videos, we would walk up and I would show you guys, you know, how that round did, but I'm actually gonna just kind of bang through these first 3 with the heavy clothing test, and then we'll go up and have a look, and when we move on to the hard barrier, we'll go up after each shot. So next, we're gonna shoot the 135 grain Federal Premium Hydra-Shok DEEP. And next we have the 147 grain Speer G2. So far I'm doing pretty well with the shot placement. Just thought I'd pat myself on the back there. All right. Let's check them out. So I went ahead and removed the heavy clothing kit so we could see the entrance holes on the front of our gel block. You can see where all 3 of those bullets went in. And then over here, we can see the wound cavity. So the one on top is the Critical Duty, the one in the middle is the Hydra-Shok DEEP, and then the one on bottom is the Speer G2. So the Hornady Critical Duty went in, you can see about 6-7 inches in, pretty big wound cavity. Actually, for a Critical Duty, that might be even slightly bigger than it usually is. And then the bullet continued down the gel block and actually came to a stop right at the end of the first gel block, maybe barely into our second ballistics gel block. And you can see it didn't expand like crazy. The Critical Duties never do. That's not what they're designed to do. But it did expand and performed really well. So we'll give that one 16.5 inches. And then the Hydra-Shok DEEP is right below it. You can see the wound cavity on that one isn't quite as big, but it did do a little damage in the gel, about 6 or 7 inches in as well. And then this one continued down the gel block and also came to a stop right at the very end of our first ballistics gel block. And although the wound cavity isn't as big, the bullet expansion is much bigger than the Critical Duty. And of course, we'll take these out when we're done so we can see them. But that Hydra-Shok DEEP expanded quite a bit more than the Critical Duty did. And then our Speer G2 is on the very bottom. It also had a pretty impressive wound cavity in the first, I would say 8 or 9 inches on that one. It's definitely bigger further down the gel block, but it left our first gel block, went into our second gel block, and went all the way down to right there. It's that one on the bottom of our second gel block there. It looks like it might be turned backwards, and it did not expand at all. And keep in mind that these are 20% ballistics gel blocks. So go ahead and get the tape measure out for the G2, because the others we know just stopped right at 16 inches. You can see those are 16-inch blocks. And then our Speer G2 looks like it came to a stop at about 26 inches into our ballistics gel block. And like I said, this is 20% ballistics gel. So you guys have never really heard me say like definitively that I hate a certain round, because I know that people prefer different things. But in my opinion, I think that's unacceptable. That is a ton of penetration for a heavy clothing test. And like I said, this is 20% ballistics gel. So to get 26 inches of penetration and 20% gel, to me, that's over penetration, and it didn't even expand at all. So the Hornady Critical Duty and the Federal Premium Hydra-Shok DEEP, both really impressive. Speer G2, not so much. All right, for the hard barrier, we're gonna use the 16 gauge piece of sheet metal. I've used this stuff in the past, and it is super thick, super heavy, and a pretty tough barrier for bullets to get through. I actually bought this to kind of replicate a car door without having to bring a car door out here every time. You can see there is a little bit of surface rust on it, but most of it is completely fine and not compromised at all. Now, I'm not exactly sure what gauge steel the FBI uses. I know they do have a steel test that they do, but I'm just not sure like how thick that steel is. But like I said, this is 16 gauge, so keep that in mind, and let's step back and see how these bullets do in the hard barrier test. All right, I put some little marks on the steel to kind of help me place these rounds in there, so hopefully we can avoid collisions inside the gel block. I just have bad luck with that whenever I make these videos. But once again, we're starting with the 135 grain plus P Critical Duty. So changing the camera settings and going back and forth is kind of tough, so I'm going to go ahead and do this one the same way I did the heavy clothing test, and we're going to shoot all 3 rounds, then we will go and see what they look like. So next up, the Hydra-Shok DEEP. So that one actually went too far left and it curved out of the gel block, but it was doing well, so I'm going to go ahead and shoot it again and see if I can move it over to the right and keep this one in the ballistics gel. This is tough. So unfortunately, the exact same thing just happened. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the Critical Duty just in case the next Hydra-Shok DEEP happens to hit it or something. I don't want to mess up, being able to see the Critical Duty. So here is where the Critical Duty went in, right there. These are the 2 Hydra-Shok DEEPs that I've shot. But you can see down here, the Critical Duty is the one right there in the middle that goes down to about right there. So the majority of the bullet is all the way down here, and you can even see that red flex tip in there as well. There is something back here. I'm not sure if maybe that's a piece of metal that it dragged into the ballistics gel with it, but it looks like all of our bullet from the Critical Duty is right there, and it stayed intact perfectly. And through our steel barrier, the Critical Duty got 9 inches of penetration. All right, let's try the Hydra-Shok DEEP one more time. Hopefully 3rd time's a charm. You know what, I'm actually gonna place this one right above the Critical Duty. They just don't seem to wanna stay in when I try to go to the left. So I'm gonna go straight above the Critical Duty, and hopefully we can keep this thing in there and not hit anything. So let's see. So the Hydra-Shok DEEP that we just shot is right there, right above the Critical Duty. You can see it didn't hit, any of the other holes. That is its own hole. And then if you look at the top of the gel block here, this is where our Hydra-Shok DEEP stopped. And right behind it is a piece of the metal that it dragged into the gel block with it. And you can see that it went up to about right there. and then kind of bounced back in our gel block. So we will give it out to here where the bullet traveled. But what's weird is the first one that we shot went all the way up here and then exited the ballistics gel. The second one came out of the gel block here. These two looked like they were gonna do really well, and that's why I wanted to redo it more in the middle of the ballistics gel. But the third one that we shot obviously stayed in the gel, but it didn't penetrate nearly as far as these two did. So the first one that we shot exited the gel at about 11 inches, and then the one that we just shot looks like it went to about the 6-inch mark. So kind of a big difference, but it makes sense. When you're shooting something like this heavy piece of sheet metal, you're not gonna get super consistent results like you would in bare gel or even a heavy clothing test. It's just such a heavy barrier, and you know, the bullets are gonna tumble different, break apart different. You can't really expect the same consistency in these really hard barrier tests as you would in like clear gel. So if you ask me, I think the Hydra-Shok DEEP still did pretty well. All right, now let's try the 147 grain Speer G2. All right, our Speer G2 went in right there on the bottom, and coming around to the side here, you can see, once again, a little piece of metal. They all seem to take a little piece of metal into the gel block with them, but the G2 did continue down the gel block. Don't confuse the wound cavity with the first one that we shot. That big wound cavity is not from the G2 through the steel, but you can see it did travel down the gel block. Looks like it may have broke apart a tiny bit right there, but G2 through the sheet metal test actually did really well. You can see that bullet's perfectly intact, didn't really break apart at all. Looks like it expanded flawlessly and got more penetration than either of the others that we shot, except maybe the first Hydra-Shok DEEP that we weren't able to capture. But through the sheet metal, the Speer G2 is pretty impressive. And the Speer G2 stopped at about 12 inches into our ballistics gel through the sheet metal test. So actually really impressive in the hard barrier test, but unfortunately it did so terrible in the heavy clothing that I still don't think I would choose this one out of the three, just because you got to assume that a lot of shootings or self-defense situations or even police officer situations are not going to be going through car doors and through windshields and stuff like that. So overpenetration is still kind of a concern for me with this one, just because of the way it did in the heavy clothing test. You know what, guys, we're gonna try the Hydra-Shok DEEP one more time, because I think I see a little window in that gel block where I might be able to place this, and the first two that I shot just looked like they were gonna do so well that I'm almost wondering if maybe the third one wasn't the fluke. And I don't really want to give an unfair result to the Hydra-Shok DEEP, because I actually like this round a lot. So fourth time is a charm with the Hydra-Shok DEEP. Let's see. I really hope it stayed in. All right, I'll take this one. So I'm not even gonna show you guys the front of the gel block because there's so much going on that it's kind of hard to see. But over here, we can actually see this one really well. So here is where the Hydra-Shok DEEP went in, and it looks like it kind of launched a piece of that metal out of the side of the gel block. So it did bring a piece of metal in with it, but it shot it out the side, and it's no longer in the gel. And then the bullet went down the gel block right here and came to a stop right there. And this is very interesting. This is something that I thought I saw on the one on the top of the gel, and I'll show you guys here in a second. But what you're seeing is the jacket completely separated from the lead bullet that's on the inside. So that right there is actually a big chunk of lead that kind of popped out the back. And then this is the copper part of the bullet that is wrapped around the lead. So both of them did penetrate about the same amount, and you can see they didn't break apart. They stayed intact really well, and I'm thinking that that probably happened a little bit later in the gel. If it broke apart, you know, early in the gel block, I don't think that they would be still intact. But it is interesting, and definitely a first for me. So up here on the other one, you can kind of see the exact same thing. You got the copper and then the lead right there. So interesting result, but nonetheless, I'm just happy that we got a clean result from the Hydra-Shok DEEP. So I'm gonna grab my tape measure here and we'll see how far this one penetrated. It looks like it's a little bit less than the Critical Duty and definitely less than the Speer G2. So I'm gonna set you guys down right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut in right here and show you guys these bullets that I pulled out of the gel block. It is nighttime and I'm inside, so the audio might be kind of weird. But first we have the Critical Duty, and the one on the left there is the one that we shot through the heavy clothing test, and it just performed perfectly. I mean, this is about what this bullet looks like when you shoot it into bare ballistics gel, so it did really well. Then we have the one that we shot through the steel, and it also did really well. It obviously flattened out quite a bit more and kind of has a mushroom shape to it, but it stayed intact and did what it's supposed to do. Then we have the Federal Premium Hydra-Shok DEEP, and again, the first one through the heavy clothing test looks perfect, just like it does in bare gel as well. But the one that we shot through the steel is probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So I don't know if this is like a bullet that's not bonded to the jacket, but it's so strange how it completely separated from the jacket and the entire bullet came out in one piece. You can see that jacket is completely empty, like a big bucket. And then we have that huge chunk of lead. That's definitely the entire bullet. So definitely the first time I've ever seen anything like that. But it did get a good amount of penetration. And then we have the Speer G2. Once again, the one that we shot through the heavy clothing just didn't even attempt to expand. This seems to be just what this bullet does. I've never gotten one to expand in bare gel or the heavy clothing, at least not expand very well. And then we have the one that we shot through the steel, and this actually did really well. It obviously flattened out, expanded pretty well, and also got the most penetration out of the three that we shot through the steel. And it looks like the Hydra-Shok DEEP got about 7 3/4 inches of penetration into our ballistics gel. So finally we got a clean result and a definitive answer on the Hydra-Shok DEEP through the sheet metal test. So between the Hydra-Shok DEEP and the Critical Duty, it's kind of a coin flip for me. I like both of them. I think they both did really well, and I wouldn't mind carrying either one of them. The Speer G2 I'm not really in love with, just because in bare gel and like heavy clothing it gets so much penetration and it never expands. I did a video on it a few weeks ago now comparing it to the Gold Dot, and I think we did bare gel and leather in that video, and it did the same thing. It just penetrated like 25 inches and then didn't expand in either test. So kind of interesting. It looks like if you shoot it through a car door or maybe a windshield, that's what it needs to really expand, and it did really well in the hard barrier test. But like I said, most situations are not going to be hard barriers involved, and that's just something you got to keep in mind. If you like it, more power to you, but I would rather have the Hydra-Shok DEEP or the Critical Duty. So let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this, which ones you like, which ones you don't like. If you have any other rounds that you would like to see me test in a similar video, let me know. If you like this video, let me know in the comments as well. And if you'd like to help support the channel, you can visit my Patreon account. That's always posted down in the description box, and I will also put a little link up here on the screen that you can click on if you would like to help support the channel. I would really appreciate it. If you like this video, please hit that like button. I would really appreciate that as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.